I turn around, this man is following me, like running after me. And I'm like, oh, how did I get myself in this situation? Hello everyone, it's Hara in Korea, and today I'm going to share with you guys a story time about the first time that I called the police while living in Korea. So this is not a super fun or funny story time, but it did happen almost a year ago, so I felt like I'm finally ready to share it now, and maybe it can give you some insight into living in Korea and how everything is not just all rainbows and sunshine. So this story time happened last year at the very end of December 2022. I didn't tell my parents about this story time, so I feel like they're not gonna be super happy. But anyway, I was in my apartment. It was a Friday night and it was pretty late at night, like maybe like 11:30 or something. And I was editing a video on my computer, just chilling with my cat, and I had my window open. And suddenly I hear this scream, like this woman's voice screaming. And I was like, what? It was a very, very, very loud scream. At first I didn't think too much about it because a lot of times when people in Korea are arguing, especially women, you hear very high-pitched screams. And so I was thinking, I was like, okay, somebody is just, you know, arguing or something happened, but it's not like anything dangerous or anything like needing to call the police for. So I went back to editing. The screaming stopped for a minute and then it started again for like 5 more minutes, just screaming, screaming, screaming. And I couldn't exactly hear what was being said. I got up to go closer to my window and open it more. And when I opened the window more, I could hear this person saying, help me, like, please, like, help me. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, what is going on? Oftentimes in Korea, I also hear, especially when it gets a little later at night and people are drunk, I will hear like women fighting with their boyfriends or people fighting with other people, but it's never involving anything physical. It's just people yelling at each other because they're angry and drunk. So I kind of figured that's what was going on. And I went back to my bed and I sat down and thought about it for a minute. And I had to like really sit with my thoughts for a minute and be like, I don't want to be a bystander. What if I wake up tomorrow and I see this news story about how this woman died by my house? I don't want that to happen. Oh my goodness, like if that happened, I would feel so terrible because I clearly heard this happening and I did nothing about it. So I decided, you know, it wasn't that late. There would still be restaurants and cafes and like the convenience stores open, you know, so I wouldn't be outside by myself, I assumed. So I figured I would just go outside and I would go and get something from the convenience store so I could just walk outside and see if I saw something happening and see if I could determine like, oh, okay, they're just fighting, like arguing, or like, oh my goodness, like something's actually happening. So I put on my jacket, I put on some like floppy type shoes, and I go outside. I didn't actually know where this interaction was taking place. I couldn't like determine that from my window, but I assumed somewhere in my vicinity, but I didn't think it would literally be almost right outside my door. So I walk outside. I was actually going to the mart. It wasn't a convenience store. So I'm walking in the direction of the mart and I'm only like 10 steps outside my door, or like outside my apartment door, not my like house door. And in this parking lot that is literally 10 steps from my apartment building, I see this woman on the floor or on the ground and this man standing over her, and he's like grabbing her arm and like hitting her, and she's like bleeding from her head. I'm standing there like shocked. I've never seen a situation like this before. I've never seen this before. I've never really even seen someone bleeding. Like obviously I've seen someone bleeding before, but I've never seen somebody else hurt somebody and them start bleeding before. So I was very shocked. I'm just standing there. Oh my gosh, what do I do? And the thing that made me even more mad is there are people walking by this situation. Like not just one, not just two, 10 people in different directions walking by this whole situation. Clearly they've heard this lady screaming for the past 10 minutes and they've done nothing. As I'm standing there shocked, 2 big Korean men walk past me who clearly could have dealt with this situation much better than I ever could have. Why is nobody else going to help with this situation? Are you serious? And I live in like the countryside, like a small beachy town area. So to be the only person and a foreigner who's willing to do something about this situation was actually quite surprising to me. And I don't know how long I was having these thoughts for. It might have only been like 30 seconds, but I really didn't know what to do at that point. I'm like, do I call the police? I don't want to go over there and like get involved. I'm not trying to fight and I don't want to put myself in danger, but I'm like, clearly this lady needs help. She had had stopped screaming at this point, and she looks up, she's still on the ground, she looks up and she sees me, and then she starts screaming again, like, help me, help me, help me. She was looking directly at me saying this, and the desperation in her voice made me feel like I have to do something. But as she was looking directly at me to say, help me, help me, help me, this man turned around and started looking at me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And it wasn't like I was alone. There are still people walking past me, but I suddenly felt like alone. So I looked at her and I said in Korean, I'm like, I'll help you, I'll be back. And then I like ran, because this man had looked at me. I don't want any part to do with that man. I will help you. I don't want any part to do with him. So I don't want to go back to my apartment, because if he sees me going to my apartment, I didn't know if he was looking at me or not, but I was like, I don't want to take any chance. So I like run around the block to this other area that's 2 blocks away or something. And it's a very well lit area, and there's lots of cars that are passing. And so I felt like at that moment I was safe to call the police. So I called the police, and I had never called the police in my life. Not in America, never called the police in my life. Never in Korea. So this was the first time I've ever called the police. I really didn't even know what to say. I was stumbling over my words, and suddenly I had forgotten every Korean word I ever knew, but I was really trying my best. So I call the number 119. I tell them, I'm like, hey, I was in my house. I heard screaming. I went outside. I saw this man punching this woman. She's bleeding. She's on the ground. That's what's going on. And so they're asking me where I am. I tell them the cafe that I'm near and where the situation's kind of happening. And then they're like, okay, we'll send some people over there, and they hang up. I am not even joking with you. I mean, I was waiting there for at least a minimum of 5 minutes, and it felt so much longer. Like, I couldn't believe nobody had come yet. I feel like it was probably like, it probably was 10 minutes. Like, it felt like a really, really long time. And I was getting surprised, like checking my phone, waiting to see some police sirens, like something. Nobody was coming. And I was like, I really cannot believe this is taking this long. So after 10 minutes, I see the guy move to like a different area, and he decides to sit down on the steps of this building, and I don't see the girl with him, and he's like on his phone, smoking, doing something, and I see the girl stand up, and she kind of starts walking in my direction to cross the street. I really didn't know what to do. Like, the guy seemed pretty distracted, like he was further away at this point on his phone, and so I don't want to get too close to anybody, okay? Like, I'm like, I don't want to endanger myself, but I kind of run up to her. I keep like a good 10 steps between us, and I'm just like, hey, in Korean, I called the police, they're coming. I called the police 10 minutes ago, so I don't know why they're not here, but I tell her I called the police, they're coming. I don't know how this guy moves so fast, because he was not that close when I said these things to her. Out of nowhere, this guy appears right behind her, and so I'm like 10 steps away from both of them. He's not like this big macho man or anything. I think he was like a little shorter than me, probably like a little smaller than me, but I'm still scared, you know? I didn't want to be involved in this situation more than I had to. Like, I didn't want any danger to myself. I'm a very scared person. So he comes up real fast, and he's like, what did you say? And I start backing away, like, I'm just like saying no in Korean, but I use the impolite version of no. Like, I didn't put the yo at the end, but again, I'm not thinking clearly, and I don't really give any cares about this man. And so because I didn't put the yo at the end of my no, I think it made him really upset, made him really mad. He got really upset with me, called me some bad names in Korean, and he like lunged at me like, what did you say? And the moment he lunged towards me, I was like, I looked at the girl. It all kind of felt like slow motion. I looked at the girl, I looked in her eyes, I was like, I am so sorry. And I like pieced out of there. I started running, and I'm in flip-flops. I don't have a bra on, in my sleeping clothes basically. And I just start running down the road, and I turn around, this man is following me, like running after me, and I'm like, how did I get myself in this situation? And so I am running extremely fast. I know I can't go back to my apartment. I'm just like, okay, I need to go to a place with a bunch of people, like a restaurant or something. I run maybe like 2 blocks. He's still running after me. Is it that serious to you? Like, oh my goodness. Thankfully, I feel like I'm a pretty fast runner. So after chasing me 2.5 or 3 blocks, I don't know, it could have been longer. I don't really know how long blocks are, but I had ran maybe about 5 or so minutes from where I had originally started, until finally I looked behind me and he was no longer running after me. I remember as I'm like running, I finally like stop, and I'm outside of this restaurant with like a bunch of people, and everyone's looking at me like, what in the world is going on? But I finally felt like good, because I'm like, okay, well, if he does come, I can go inside the restaurant and I'll just wait here for now. Like, Like it had been 15 plus minutes at this point since I originally had called the police. This is a small town. There is no reason why they should not have been there almost immediately. So finally, after like 15 or more minutes, the police finally call me back. I am now not near the original location. And they ask me where I am. So I say the name of the restaurant and they're like, okay, we're coming. 5 minutes later, they finally show up. A police car shows up, an ambulance shows up. This is not even the right spot and you guys took a very long time. 3 police officers get out of the car and they come up to me and they're like, you're the one who called, right? I'm like, yes. And I say, I'm telling them in Korean, this is not the right location. The lady is 2 blocks that way. She's very injured. We need to go there. And they're not listening to me. I am speaking in Korean, but they're trying to speak to me in broken English. I think as I was speaking in Korean, they were just like, oh, she speaks English. We need to speak to her in English. I'm like, no, I'm speaking Korean. Anyway, they're asking me these questions. They're like, what's your name? They had me write down my name, write down my number, write down my address, write down some details about the situation. But I'm like, this is wasting more time. I'm like, I even told them, I'm not the one who needs help. They're like, did you know these people? I was like, no, but I'm telling you what I saw and I'm telling you this lady was bleeding from her head. Like, you need to go and help her. But they're still wasting time having me write down all of this information. And so finally, they're like, okay, we're going to drive you home. Well, what about the situation that I saw and what are we doing about that? And I get in the car and they're like, okay, can you tell us your address so we can take you to your house? And I'm like, my house is really close to here. You just need to drive straight. You need to turn right. You need to turn right again. That is my house. And they're like, nope, you gotta tell us your address. We need your address. And I had written my address down or whatever. So they see my address or whatever. They type it into their little computer. It's not popping up. They're wasting so much time typing the address into the computer and it's not showing up. And I'm not even joking with you. This interaction with the address and typing it into the GPS alone took 10 minutes. That one I am confident about. That is not an exaggeration. 10 minutes typing in my address and I'm constantly telling them, I know the way to my house. I can explain it to you. I'm saying this in Korean. I can explain how to get to my house. It is very close to here. It's very easy to get there. And they're like, we gotta have your address. We gotta put it in the computer. We have to get the right address. And I'm like, I really could not believe that that was the thing that was important. But eventually I pull up my app that I use for delivery and I showed them the way that the address was written there and they type that in. And after a few different variations of that, they finally can find my address and they drive to my house. It takes 1 minute to drive to my house. So again, I could have easily explained how to get there instead of wasting this time. And as we're driving there, they're like, oh, you're so good at Korean, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't want these compliments. I just, why is nothing being done about this situation? It really upset me. And after we get to my house, I explain, I'm like, yeah, you see right there, that parking lot, that is where all of this happened. The lady walked that way. I'm sure, I mean, I know we've wasted like 20 minutes, but she was very injured and they were walking. I don't think they would have gotten that far. And the police officer says to me, he's like, yeah, we'll find them. Don't worry. It'll be okay. So he's like, just go into your house. So I go into my house. I call my friends. I call my boyfriend. And everyone's like, Brianna, what were you doing? What were you thinking? I don't know, but nobody was helping this lady. I was really surprised. Yeah, I expected to get a call. You know, I had given all my information, you know, something. I even explained, I was like, this man chased me down the street. Like, come on. And nothing. I never heard anything. No other update about this story ever. No call, no text message, no anything. For at least like the first like 6 months, if I was by myself, I would not go outside of my apartment if it was dark. I was very naive, like, oh, I live in a small town, very country town. Nothing bad happens here, but clearly things do. A lot of crimes in Korea do have to deal with crimes against women or domestic violence or family violence. So I guess I did know that those things were a possibility, but I just never thought to see it in my very small town. And another thing that really, really upsets me is everybody else's inability or refusal to even help with the situation. And I was later talking to other Korean people and they basically were like, well, if we get involved, if I see a man hitting a woman and I go up to that man and I try to stop and interfere, I could get in trouble with the police because I might have now caused some violence to that man. And I'm like, okay, fine, I get that. But nobody else called the police. I was the first person to call the police after hearing this situation for 10 minutes. And then after I called the police did absolutely nothing except waste time. It took 10 to 15 minutes to get to me. Once they got to me, wasted time again. And then with the whole address thing, that was the most frustrating thing in the world for them to just waste my time on something so unimportant. And I'm like, you guys live in the countryside. You have absolutely nothing to do. There is no crime or violence happening in the countryside. This is your first time where somebody is calling, asking for help, and you guys are doing absolutely nothing. And so I was just really disappointed by the Korean police at that moment. And to this day, like, I just have no faith in them. And that might sound really terrible and bad because maybe they've done great things and helped a lot of people. But from what I saw that night, and again, I know that was only one experience of mine, but I just saw them do absolutely nothing and waste time, and I have no idea what happened after that situation, and I hope that that lady was okay, but nobody did anything, and it was very frustrating. Anyway, yeah, that was my story on my first time calling the Korean police and how they did absolutely nothing. Yeah, if you guys have any stories about times you've had to call the police in Korea or times you've seen the police in Korea do nothing or not be helpful, leave them down below, because I've read other articles, I've heard other stories about people having to call the police in Korea and them just not helping at all, and I'm just like, is this just the normal? But yeah, that's not to scare anybody who's coming to Korea. Overall, I do feel like pretty safe in Korea. That was one of the times where I felt like, oh my gosh, you know, but overall, I do feel like Korea is a pretty safe place to be. So this story is not to scare anybody, just to let you know to be aware of your surroundings. Maybe if you hear something like that, instead of being like me and going to investigate the situation on my own, maybe just stay in your house and call the police. But I didn't know. I didn't want to call and like nothing be wrong and me just being stupid. But again, I don't have any advice or anything else to say at the end of this video, but yeah, thank you guys for watching. If there's any other videos you guys would like to see, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would appreciate if you guys subscribe to my channel, and yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.